Hi, and welcome back to the Living Uncompromised podcast. Hi, Jen.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
Are you ready to dive into lesson 5?
I am. It's gonna get interesting today. It's gonna get exciting.
It is interesting and complicated and a little messy, all kind of stirred in the same pot.
Yes, 100%. So, yeah, I'm excited to dig into this today.
Well, if we just kind of recap where we left off, last
Uh-huh.
week studying, it was at the end of day 3 of them trying to figure out his riddle. So we're going to pick up today on day 4 and really
Okay.
start to see their desperation and finding out, what his riddle means and him knowing that he's the only one that is going to ever figure it out.
Yeah, I think that's an important reminder as we start this section that he's pretty confident here about his riddle because he knows he's not told anybody about this incident with the lion, and so no one knows. Nobody would have any reason or ability to understand this, and so he's got to be pretty confident going into this. And now we're starting day 4, and they still can't figure it out, and so they're getting desperate and start um, using some desperate measures and we have this confidence of Samson and kind of the desperation of his companions to figure this out. So I think that's important to remember going into this section.
Yeah, and if we go ahead and dive in right there and pick up, I think that's a great point to see you definitely have two different sides here
Uh-huh.
and we'll see how it kind of plays out by the end of it, whether the roles don't
Right.
really flip, but they definitely do not stay in these lanes. So
Yeah.
as we dive right into, their desperation, they come
Uh-huh.
straight out of the gate talking about or bringing threats to his wife and her
Yeah.
family.
Right. Yes. So we're picking up in verse 15, and I'll just read this verse. It says, "On the fourth day, they said to Samson's wife, 'Coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us.'" So these would be the companions that have come to the wedding and that were given to Samson. And they're saying, "Coax him to tell us this." And they say, "Or we will burn you and your father's household to death." And then they make the statement, "Did you invite us here to rob us?" So, like, we can't figure this out. Like, what are you trying? Why did you invite us here to do this? So you need to get this information or else. Um, and so they threaten her to get the information from Samson.
Yes, and my Bible uses the word entice. And
Uh-huh.
so I think that's the same picture, but I think the word entice kind of gives a little different view of it too. Like whatever you need to do, get the information from him.
Yes. Yes. And so and she's threatened here by her own people, and so I think that's an important piece of this too. She's threatened by the Philistines to do what, to get this information from Samson, and so because we're gonna talk about her approach, going into this, how she actually does it, but it's important to remember that she's been threatened to get this information for them.
Well, and when we look at the Philistines and what type of people they are, I think this is a really good glimpse because, they're not even halfway or, they're just reaching the halfway point of the week of the time frame that Samson gave them to figure out the
Right,
riddle. And they have just automatically resorted to, violence to death kind of thing. There was no
right,
in between. We didn't get it, so this is the next step. And so I just
right.
think it's a pretty good picture of really the type of people the Philistines were and what we're dealing with. I mean, this is their own people, and this is still how they're treating them.
Right. Yes. And so, yeah, this is how they accomplish what they want to accomplish. And we're going to see it even in the next lesson, how they really follow through with what they say, and we see them even more in this same role. And so that is important to remember that about them, because these are the people ruling over the Israelites at this time. So this is important
Mhm.
to see how they are handling things.
Yes, and, as we take that step and then dive into the pieces where we see Samson's wife try to get the information from him. So her life's now
Mhm.
been threatened, and she's going to start feeling desperate as well because she, I'm sure, would believe that her people would follow through with this. So now she
Mhm.
has 3 days to get her husband to tell the information, or she's dead. And so is her, her household. And so she's now, we're going to see her resort to desperation now. And
Right.
as we head into that, my Bible steps right in and says in verse 16 that Samson's wife wept over him and said, "You only hate me. You do not love me." And this is where she's starting. She's starting to get him right here emotionally.
Right. Yeah, she's sobbing. She's saying things like, "You hate me and you don't really love me," because he won't tell her this riddle. So she's pressing him into this with this kind of an emotional appeal. There's one thing I think is really important about what she says to him. In verse 16, she says, "You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer." And so I think my people is really key there because I think it really speaks to the situation, right? They are not equally yoked, as we would say, because she's not of God's people. She's not one of the Israelites. And remember, his parents were like, "Wouldn't you want to marry someone from among our people instead of the uncircumcised Philistines, meaning those who are not of God's chosen people?" And so we see this. There's very much, even though they are supposed to be together in this union, there's very much my people, and you have not confided in me. She wants him to confide in her for her own protection, but also it shows this division because she says my people.
Yeah, and I think we have to realize too, we don't have the backstory between her and Samson. How much time have they really spent together? Do they even have any type of relationship outside of this wedding and courtship that we've seen here? And so there may not have been any time to grasp or create any type of relationship there. So for
Mhm.
her just to say you wanted to marry me and we're already emotionally connected is just, just doesn't work that way. And so
Right.
she's just appealing right to it. And we see Samson's response to her. He kind of does the same thing back to her because then he says, "Why would I tell you? I haven't even told my parents."
Right. Yeah, and so with those two things, you see this division, which is exactly what it was, right? Because these were not God's people, the Philistines, and so you've got them connecting here, but you still have my parents and your people, and it's two distinct groups, and we know that God has sent him in for this purpose, and we can see this division here between these people, and I think that's important to remember, especially as we remember Samson's purpose to go in among the Philistines anyway.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And, as we watch the week play out, we head right into the end of the 7 days now. And
Mhm.
she's getting extremely desperate at this point. And she just
Right.
says, my Bible says she pressed him hard. Like this is
Mhm.
her last opportunity here. The end of the seven
Yeah.
days is up. So she
Yeah.
presses him even harder. So she's probably been doing this consecutively each day, trying to just really get at him. And
Right.
so, on the 7th day, here we are, and he
Mhm.
gives in. So what's your take on that?
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting piece of this. Verse 17 says she cried the whole 7 days, and on the 7th day he finally told her because she continued to press him. So we have very much this sense that he just gave into this because he was worn out with it. It almost feels, like he just can't handle it anymore. He doesn't think maybe through the situation. He just kinda gives in the moment. I find it so interesting that if he had just held on a little bit longer, he could have told her without consequence because the time was almost up for the companions to answer this riddle. But just it's because she pressed him, he finally just told her. And you get the sense that he was not thinking ahead or considering the consequences. He was acting in the moment. I think that speaks to his character here. He's just worn out with her and he just kind of says it and does not understand what what's going to happen, or doesn't seem to grasp it or be concerned or even thinking about how that's going to affect his situation. He has a pretty strong advantage going into this. The Lord has given him this victory over the lion. He's the only one with the information. He's got this in the bag, as they say. But he just gives up this advantage to her because of her continual pressing him, and it really flips things here.
Yeah, and I think you're right, it definitely is a picture of his character because we see this pattern, um,
Mhm.
more
Mhm.
than, over and over here, and this is just part of how he gets exasperated and gets, flustered and angry or whatever and reacts. He's pretty reactionary.
Yes. Yes, I think that's a great description, because we know, that this is not the last time that he will be in this situation. This will happen to him again, and we will see a similar situation. And so this was definitely, I feel like reactionary is a great word for it. Should be a learning moment for him. We'll see that we have, um maybe more to learn as we go on with the story. But yeah, I think reactionary is a great way to describe it.
Well, if we keep going with the story, then we see that, obviously Samson told his wife the riddle.
Mhm.
He She then goes and tells her people, and it
Mhm.
says that by right before sun went down or before sun went down, they revealed to him the riddle.
Right. Yeah, I think that's
And
important. Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I was just gonna point out, his response, but go for it. We'll get there.
Well, I just wanted to point out in verse 17 says she in turn explained the riddle to her people. And so again, it's this division between them, right? She gets the information and she immediately turns it over to to her people, which we see that division again. And then I think it speaks to that, where we have to be careful with our enemies, right? Because with our enemy and those that would come against us, because she pressed him and pressed him and pressed him, and when he finally gave into that, it she in turn turned on him. She turned on him immediately to save herself. And it was this, it's just a lesson for us in guarding ourselves against those who would try to come against us, um, and and harm us. And I just think that's an important piece there, that she immediately pressed him, pressed him, pressed him, pressed him until he just couldn't deal with it anymore. And then she immediately, told her people, which would she knew would create a circumstance, for him. So,
Well, and you're right because if you look at Samson, you take someone who is in a very confident situation to
mhm,
becoming in a very vulnerable situation.
right.
So the tables have turned on him because he just couldn't stand firm to the end on it. And so I think when we apply that lesson to ourselves, to your point, it is a lesson for us. And when you apply it, you really see the importance of not allowing the enemy to defeat you and for you to stand and be able to
Mhm,
not put yourself in a vulnerable situation. Well, I think his response, I can hear his tone in it, I think, because we kind of know how reactionary he is, but my Bible makes me it made me a chuckle a little bit just because he uses, the word heifer. Had you not plowed my heifer? Referring to his wife. And so you can
mhm,
tell that he is very aware of what they did to her.
mhm,
He has a full understanding and grasp of the situation. And he
mhm,
knows that she then went and told him that they got the answer from her and all of that. And he knows that her pressing him was because they pressed her. And so he
mhm.
has a really clear grasp of it all.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he is well aware of the situation because he knows there's no way anybody could have figured this out without her turning in that information. And so, there's anger there. You couldn't figure it out. You had to send in a spy to get the information. And he's
Mhm.
well aware of that. And so, he made himself vulnerable, but at the same time, he's upset that they did this, that they sent her in and used her, to get the information.
And then I wonder if he's upset with himself also. We
Mhm.
don't know that. It just something I was thinking about between being obviously he's going to take his anger out on them, but
Right.
is there disappointment or upset in himself that he didn't hold out, or is it just strictly all pointed towards the fact that they, came at him and he was vulnerable, by
Mhm.
them? But
Yeah.
I think, immediately after all of this is played out, we start in verse 19 and it says, the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him.
Uh-huh.
So, in the midst of these decisions he's made and everything that's played out, we do see the Lord come upon him
Uh-huh.
and obviously give him the ability to do what he does next.
Right. And so he goes and it says he went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 of their men, stripped them of their belongings, and gave their clothes to those who had explained the riddle. And so he makes good on the terms of the riddle and of the agreement, but he takes it from their own people. And I think that's important piece here. Two important things here. First, the power of the Lord came on him. And so the Lord equips him to do what God's called him to do there, which is to begin the deliverance of the Israelites from the Philistines. The Lord gives him power to be victorious in this and to follow through, and then he takes from them what he has to pay for them solving the riddle. It is still a loss to the Philistines.
Yeah, I love that part actually. The irony of all of that he he did lose, but they still
So
lost
did they.
too. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that part. So,
Yeah.
um, but that's all handled, but we leave the study for this week, in the last verse, or the last two verses where he is angry. My Bible, the
Mhm.
ESV says in hot anger.
Yeah. Yeah. He is very angry. So he goes off from this piece. Um, and I want to say this, and as we move forward, I think it's important what we were just talking about. So I'm just going to go back for just a second, but
Sure.
to think about his loss. He lost the riddle, but the Lord empowered him to still to deal with, he got what he needed to get to pay back the terms of the riddle, and he still accomplished um his defeat of some of the Philistines in this. And so
Mhm.
the Lord was victorious in what he was calling Samson to do. He made Samson victorious in that. And so they lost actually, more. He lost in that he made himself vulnerable. And this should have been a lesson for him. But I just it made me think about, as Christians, when we are following the Lord, he helps us even in those moments where we feel vulnerable or perhaps we've messed up. He he comes to our aid and helps us even in those moments. And I think that that's an important piece here of that, because yes, he did lose the riddle technically, and this should have been an opportunity for him to learn, but the Lord still came to his aid, and he was able to still deliver a blow against the Philistines, which is what he was there to do. And I think that's an important piece too. So
Well,
just tagging
it
on to
really
what we were
is.
talking about.
Yeah, and a reminder that the Lord is not bound by our abilities or our decisions. His will is going to be done
Right.
regardless of us. He uses
Right.
us, and regardless of the decisions we've made or the things we're doing, his will is going to be done. Um
Right.
Hopefully in and through us, as it still was with Samson, even though, he fumbled things up here a little bit, but the Lord's
Yes.
will ultimately will always be done.
Right. That's right. And I think Samson continues to fumble a little bit because he's so angry, which we started to talk about. And so in his anger, he left and went back home, went to his father's house, and his wife was given to his friend.
Which, next week we'll see we'll see how that plays out. We'll
Right.
call that part 2 of this scenario. But,
Yes.
but yes, and
Yes.
so you almost feel like he just storms off and storms home,
Yeah.
which is, obviously not the way to handle things, but he in his anger, he leaves,
Right.
and we will find out, because of that, because there was no communication of what he was doing, there was consequences to that with his wife and all that, and she was given to his companion. And we'll
Yeah.
we'll pick that up next lesson. But I think we just
Right.
kinda leave the scene here today. There's no resolution. I mean, to him and this scenario, he's just had a battle and he's angry and he left.
Yeah. And I think that just sing that piece as we go into the next piece is that, he lets his anger kind of get the best of him, and he leaves the situation kind of unresolved and likely feeling kind of, I mean, I'm sure very frustrated. In some ways you feel like, yeah, of course he's angry. Um, but we see that he kind of just leaves, and then we're going to see he wants to just kind of pick back up. And so there is this, obviously he's angry, but in that anger he rushes out, and it is leaving things unresolved. And so
Yes.
I think that's important.
Well, and then next lesson, we'll pick up, right there and dive right into chapter 15. But I think this was good conversation, and I am appreciating diving in and just seeing Samson for who he is, and the good and the bad, but that the Lord is still with
Yeah.
him.
Yeah, I think it's really cool too. If you've heard the story of Samson, you kind of get this impression in your mind, and when we dig into the story, we really see the details of where the Lord used him, and he was successful, but where his own weaknesses kind of causes him to trip and stumble a little bit, and perhaps affects his effectiveness. But to your point, the Lord's will and purpose is done, and so it's just really neat to dig into the details of his story.
I agree. Okay, well, until next time, and we hope everyone has a great week of study, and we will dive into chapter 15 next week.
Sounds good. I hope everybody has a great week.